Well, good morning, everyone. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I'm Pastor Brian. I'm one of the pastors here at Radiant Church, and I hope each and every one of you had some fantastic food and family time and football, and I have to say, go Cowboys! Yeah! Haven't been able to watch a Thanksgiving game for like 4 years. It's like, oh no, we lost another one. So it was good that we won this Thanksgiving, and I'm hopeful for the future coming with that. What a great time of the year with Thanksgiving. We have so many things to be that we're blessed by. There's so many different opportunities to just spend time with family, and I know with spending time with my in-laws, and with my parents, and having both kind of converge in this Iowa area, it's fantastic, and it's great to be able to do that. And it's just a wonderful thing. And for those of you that may not know who I am married to the very talented keyboardist up here, Amanda. And up here on this side is a picture of us. This is Abigail in the middle. This is our wonderful toddler. Ben was talking about losing marbles. I totally understand with that. I was kind of there yesterday. Abigail was just having a different kind of day yesterday, just kind of all over the place. And so I totally relate to that. But this is our wonderful family, and they're just such a blessing to me. My wife, Amanda, is just a very talented woman. I'm just so blessed by our marriage, and then also Abigail, just having her along, and she's just such a joyful and delightful baby, and look forward to seeing her here whenever she wakes up. So it's great that's a great thing about having parents in town is they can help with, the baby. So she's not sleeping at home by herself or anything like that. So just in case, we are all over that. So today I have the privilege of being able to talk about our new series, get to kick it off, and this is Random Acts of Christmas. This is a graphic you'll see here in the next few weeks. And basically each week we have a different opportunity to be generous and to put our giving into action. Maybe it looks a little bit differently. And today I'm going to challenge you with something a little bit different, and it's going to be something that maybe you haven't thought of before. And we're hoping that some of these random acts will turn into habits. And that's the beautiful thing about starting something new, is experiencing something new and seeing how maybe this will be something I really want to do, or feel like God's calling me to do, or He moved in my life as I did that. And so we're hopeful that these different acts will evolve into habits. And we'll be talking more about how to put these acts into practice very soon. And today I'm going to talk about the combination of two things. And basically those two things are relationships and generosity. And so as you imagine, relational is a certain thing that we all have and we deal with friendships and relationships. And the generosity is usually tied to money and things like that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. At Christmas, it's really easy to think about generosity as just buying gifts. And, maybe you've seen this, where you're holding a bunch of different bags of things that you buy. And today, we're not really talking about anything that you're going to buy. It's going to be something that you can do and how you can be generous outside of actually purchasing something. And so that's something that probably is a little bit different, because this time of the year is really all about buying things. It's about buying gifts, and it's more about this time of the year than really any other time. It's something that as you can go to the mall, like Black Friday or whatever it is, the days to come, you'll see the malls are just packed. They're crawling with activity, especially when the snow hits and the weather gets bad. It's the one-stop place for everybody and to be able to do things. And it's so tempting to just walk along and see all those different stores and be able to buy things for some people. Some of us, like myself, sometimes like to shop for a good deal, and so it's very easy to think about that. But today I want to challenge you with thinking about relationships. And how can you give in relationships? And how can you be relationally generous? And so this isn't really about lavish gifts or anything like that. In some cases, it's just diving in and engaging in your relationships. And I'm going to give you some practical ways to do that. But just think about this for a second. Do you spend time in friendships and relationships, or do you spend more time shopping? And for this time of the year, that's a really thought-provoking question. As the clock starts to count down to December 25th, it's really easy to just be busy about hopping from one sale to the next, hopping from one store to the next, because this one doesn't have it. I got to go across town and go here to go get it. But today I want to challenge you with thinking about this time very differently. So this phrase, relational generosity, this is kind of a new phrase. I don't know if anyone's ever heard this before. Has anyone ever heard this phrase before? This is something that came up recently when we were doing some planning, and quite honestly, it was a thought-provoking phrase. It was a combination of two words. I understood what they meant, but I never really thought about them being together, and it's very thought-provoking. I've been thinking about it for a little while now, and before we progress forward, I'd like to just unpack what both of these words mean, and let's look at relational. Let's look at that first. So I got a little definition here, thanks to the internet, the interwebs. We have, this is one of the definitions for relational, concerning the way in which two or more people or things are connected. So notice that in this definition, we're talking about two or more people or things. And today, we're going to just focus on the people part, because this is really what I think is the core of what a relational thing means. They put things in there because of like technology and science and those kind of things that kind of mean a different thing when it comes to relationships. And today, when we're talking about relational, we're going to talk about that from the people perspective. And so, the Bible is full of relationships. And I don't know if you've ever thought about it like that, but from creation, where we have Adam and Eve, we have the creation of man and woman, to Jesus and the disciples, David, all these different prophets and just characters and people through the Bible, there are relationships that are taking place, not only between each other, but with God. And, God can interact with us vertically, but it can also interact with us horizontally. And so he can do that through relationships, and there are several examples through the Bible where he can do that. So let's take a look at the second phrase, the second word here, which is generosity, the quality of being kind and generous. Now, honestly, I had never really thought about what the definition of generosity meant until I actually went through and typed it in on Google to see what would pop up. And it's interesting that kind and generous are attached to that definition, because it's not something I think we think about. I think we think about giving in abundance or doing something that's unexpected or things like that. But this is like the quality of being kind and doing so and being generous. And who wouldn't want to be the recipient of some generosity? I mean, wouldn't it just be great to receive whatever blessings that people may have if they're generous? And in a world like we live in today, not many people are very generous, especially with money. And if they don't think of anything outside of money when it thinks about generosity, then there's probably not a whole lot of that kind of mentality or thinking as we live through life. And so the Bible defines generosity as an act that we do cheerfully. And so let's look at 2 Corinthians 2, 6 through 7. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and open it up. I'd love for us to just walk through a couple of verses here. And it'll be on the side screens in case you don't have a Bible with you today. So why don't you follow along with me as I read this. Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So in verse 6, which is that first part, note how it says, sparingly will also reap sparingly. So if you're not generous, then you're not really going to receive generosity back. But in that second part of that phrase, for those that do and act generously, they will receive generously. So that's something to keep in mind as we go about our lives, to make sure that, if we're thinking we're just going to be able to receive and take from different situations, from people, or from culture, we're basically going to get what we put into it. And so in the second part of this passage, we have where it says, each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So if you have a hardcore or hard copy of the Bible there, I'd encourage you to circle heart, because that is something that is very core to what we're talking about here. Because notice that it doesn't say head. And I think there's a lot of different reasons why that could be, but as I was thinking about this, you think about your mind or your head, you're often maybe calculating, you're thinking about, maybe you're doing your math in your head or whatever it is. These are like where the complex functions that happen in your mind and how you do things. But your heart is more of like your core, and it's your soul. It's like the thing that, in some cases, where the emotions come from. And so in this verse, in this passage, it's interesting to me that it talks about being what was decided in the heart to give as opposed to what's in the head to give. And if you can imagine with me for a minute, our heads can rationalize things. So it's real easy in this generosity and this thinking about being generous that our mind could go, oh, I shouldn't be generous because I need to do other things with this money or this time or these resources. But here it's talking about the heart. And then the second part of that, talking about reluctantly or under compulsion. So this is supposed to be something that's free will. It's not supposed to be something that's coerced or something that you have to do because you're under pressure or something like that. And so this great passage in Corinthians gives us a great insight into the cheerful giver and also kind of helps us define generosity. And so, and just kind of putting some of this together, there are many reasons why friendships and relationships with others are important. And today's message isn't so much about the importance about that, but more about how do we relate and how do we do that in our relationships. And so you're following along in the outline there in the worship guide, coming up to one of those fill in the blanks I put out there. One great way to think about relationships is with the idea of investing in others. And so when you think about investing, once again, kind of a money kind of term, but if you think about that in the lives of people, there's a great opportunity to invest in people and to be able to pour into them and help them. And when it comes to this time of the year, there are so many different ways that we can do that. And investing requires many things. It requires effort, it requires priorities, requires time management. And such work is tough, but it's worth doing because in relationships, especially when they're meaningful and they're two-way, it's a beautiful thing to be a part of, and it's something that God wants us all to be a part of. It's not something that is just something that one or two people in this world get to experience. This is something I get to experience. I hope you will experience. It's something God wants us to experience. And so who wouldn't want a meaningful relationship? Or 2, or 3, or 4, and so on. And with meaningful relationships, there's a lot of things you've got to do. And a lot of times we put a lot of other things ahead of relationships. We put a lot of value into other things. Our desires and our focus are more about ourselves. Maybe it's instant gratification, wanting an immediate response to a text or a phone call or something like that. There's this idea of, I want it now. It's like, like on that screen, just with the send button, it says now. I mean, this is kind of the world we live in. It's like, I want it now. I want to post it on Facebook. I want to like. I want an interaction. I want to call someone. I want them to answer. I want to text someone. And so our culture is making us think that this is how we are to live. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? No, absolutely wrong. I mean, this is not how we are to live. This is something that we are to lead the culture with, and the Bible is full of ideas, and Jesus' life is prime example of how to live things in a way that are meaningful. And when it comes to relationships, there's all sorts of ways that we can pull from different stories that help us with that. And so that leads me to the next concept that I would like for you to think about today, and that is this phrase of, in order to live a successful life, to live in a godly way, we need to begin with the end in mind. And for some of you guys that have been through our men's program, this is something that has been a part of men's fraternity in 33. And the idea of this is looking at what you want something to become at the end point, and then working backwards what you need to do to get there. Same thing with friendships and relationships. This can apply to that, whether you're 90, 80, 50, 20, wherever you may be age-wise. You don't want to end up alone. Who wants to end up alone? So, we all want friends at certain parts of our life, and in order to do that, we've got to think about that, not only just at the end of our lives, but all along the way, and there's opportunities to invest in that. And so we've got to invest into our relationships, because when we may need it, we may not have had time to prepare for it. And, there's so many different things that can happen to us in our lives, different crises. Maybe it's a car accident, or maybe it's a death in the family, or whatever it may be. These things that sometimes drop us to our knees are great opportunities where we need other people in our lives. And there's no more important time where we're going through a tough and a difficult time than to need a friend. And if we're not investing in friendship, you're going to have nobody there. And I don't want that for any of you guys, any of you out there today. I want you to be able to have a friend, someone you can call when something goes wrong. And so this idea of relational generosity is a way to do just that. And so, the other thing about relationships that we got to think about is that they're two-way. And so, see this sign of a two-way street. Relationships, it's not about the instant gratification or anything like that, and it's not about, just taking from someone, but it's also giving. And that's really where meaningful relationships come into play. And, if they're not, then they're just half-hearted. These are really just acquaintances when you're just doing something one way. And so I challenge you today to think about that and how that we can interact and relate with each other in a two-way. Because it's very easy for relationships to fall apart. I have a little bit of an example of that. I remember in high school, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, which is a big, suburban area. There's several different suburbs. We grew up in the east side of the Dallas area, and it's called Mesquite. And here are just a few random pictures that kind of give you a little insight on what Mesquite was like. It's a home of the Mesquite Rodeo. There's lots of rodeos and things going on. It's also named after a tree, which is that picture on the bottom left. That's a mesquite tree, classic Texas. Let's name something after a tree. And there's not too many of those. And these trees are drought tolerant, and they take very little water. But in Mesquite, Texas, this is where I grew up most of my life. And right, in the middle of high school, my dad had an opportunity to move us across town to a different suburb. And as you can imagine, this town of Mesquite, this is where I'd gone to elementary school. This is where I went to junior high. This is where I started choir, marching band, started church. A lot of things happened, in that time, and I had all sorts of friends. Knew the people across the street. They watched me grow up. I mean, there were just all sorts of pockets of friends. So then, junior year, I moved northwest to a town called Plano. And just to give you a little perspective, you may not be able to see a whole lot of this, but here's a map of where that trajectory lands. And this may not be that big of a deal. It's maybe, 15 miles away or something like that. But it's 30 to 45 minutes when it comes to traffic. And when you're, a teenager and you don't have a car or anything like that, it's not very easy to get from here or there. And, I dealt with this in one way, and my brother, who was 3 years younger than me, was really trapped by it because he, was 3 years younger, and so he wasn't coming up on the potential of being able to get a driver's license and stuff like that. And so, at the beginning stages of, that time in Plano, I was able to, keep some of those relationships that I had formed in Mesquite, but as you can imagine, they just started to drop off. And the thing that's different about Mesquite and Plano is Mesquite was like a town of 140,000, which is a lot of people, but then Plano was double that. And so I get out there, and all the schools are large, they're huge. We had, I think it was 5A high schools. I had 1,500 people in my graduating class. It's Plano was crowds. It was traffic. It was lots and lots of people. And it was just, really easy to just kind of fall into what I could do, which was just, interact with some of the people I could, pick out and interact with. And so when you're a junior in high school, you're kind of doing that from scratch, and you're trying to do that kind of quickly. And so, this was a time in my life where I lost some people and I lost some friends. And a lot of it had to do with me not investing in them. And this was before the days of Facebook. So, some of you that are, younger may not understand, we really didn't have certain technologies, I just got a cell phone, when I was a senior in high school, internet came along in college, this was a different kind of world. And now I've been able to reconnect with some of those people through Facebook, but it's really hard sometimes in life to be able to do that when you don't have things like technologies and modern conveniences. And so, I was a prime example of letting the busyness of high school sweep me up, where I was just focusing on myself, my own schedule, my own job, my own just getting through school. And I wasn't able to invest back into those friendships. And, I imagine there are several of us that have done that at different times of our life, where, maybe you have a baby, or maybe you have a life change, or someone needs to move into your house, or whatever it may be. Your circumstances change where you're not able to devote the time and energy that you used to, and friendships and relationships require that. And so in order for us to be relationally generous, we have to be mindful of that, and then we also have to have a different kind of mindset. And so when we accept and embrace the story of God and the redemption that He gave us through His Son, we have to recognize that that means a change. And not only how do we do things, but how we act and how we think. And so one of these ways to stimulate some different thinking is this idea of God's economy. So if you can imagine, certain things are important to God and some things are not important to us. And that's basically the loose definition of what God's economy would be. So it's like the riches and things of this world, the things we can accumulate, these things may be important to us, but they're not important to God. And so as we think about being relationally generous, we want to think about these things through the filter, through the lens of God's economy. So in order to love people, we have to be in relationship with them. And to be in relationship with them, we have to invest in them. So came across a quote in thinking about this time, and just read it for you real quickly. God doesn't ask for us to change people, He asks us to love people. And that's just a great reminder that what is this all about? It's like, are we around people to change them, especially as believers? Is that something that we feel like we're supposed to do? No, we're just called to love them. In a lot of cases, loving them can be simple. It's spending time. It's doing things with them. So meaningful relationships are invaluable, and they are treasures all into themselves. And there's a brief list of just different qualities or elements that make up meaningful relationships, and you can follow along, make notes of those in the outline that are there. I'm just going to pop up a few of those different elements real quick. We have commonality, having things in common. We've got authenticity, being the real you, not pretending to be somebody else. We have vulnerability, be able to be yourself, but also in an honest kind of way where people can interact with you. Letting our guard down would be a great way to think about that. Forgiveness, being able to forgive, and especially when people let us down, when our friends let us down. A meaningful relationship is one where you can forgive that other person when something happens. Focus, where we're able to talk about what we bring to a relationship as opposed to something we can take from a relationship. And then the last one is time. Anything that is of quality requires time, effort, and energy. And this is really the big one. And that's the last thing I want for us to really think about today is the time part of that. So one big way to invest in our relationships is to spend time with those we are in relationship with. And have you ever thought about how much time Jesus spent with people, or even how much time He spent with the disciples? Throughout the Gospels, we are told that Jesus is constantly around people. He's healing them, He's talking with them, spending time with them. He spent time with people around the clock, and He did so with the disciples. And for that short period of time, those 3 years where He was investing in the lives of those 12 that were with Him, He spent a lot of time with people. And just thinking about, let's just take Peter, for example. He spent a lot of time with Peter. He knew him by name. He talked to him. He went to his house. He healed his wife's mother. He met his brother and friends. And not only this, he just spent lots of time with him. And they knew each other. They laughed together. They went through some tough times. They went through some challenges. And even, while he coached him and was helping him to be a better man, he also had to forgive him when he betrayed him. And so just even thinking about that is a great opportunity to think about how God has interacted with people through His Son, Jesus Christ, and through one of the people that was close to Him. So that brings us to our so what moment, and that is just a question I would like to just pose for you real quick, and it's going to be up here on the side screen. Instead of thinking about all the things you can or can't buy this Christmas season, what if you thought about your relationships and how you could devote more time to them instead? And so here are 4 scenarios, and these are just very practical ways that we could do this. And there's some room there on your outline. You can jot down some more information about that as I explain each one of them. The first one, simply put, is just less about the transactions and more about the interactions. Here's an example of what that could look like. So let's say you go to the grocery store, or you're shopping, or you're in a retail environment. One way that you could be relationally generous is by having a conversation with them. It's not like, here's my credit card, here's my whatever, bing, bang, boom, I'm out. It's like reading the moment, maybe, if they're, seeing where they're at, maybe just saying hi, or even just spending a moment just getting to know who they are. I mean, most people have to wear name tags. It could be as simple as just saying their name back to them, like as you're talking to them, or like, thank you for your help, John, or thank you, whoever it may be. But that's just a great opportunity. And especially if you read that something's awry. And I think we've all sensed or felt that, where you're interacting with somebody that you don't know, and you just, something just seems a little bit off. And what a great opportunity as a believer to just have a quick little conversation where it's like, hey, how's it going? Are you having a good day today? Or, yeah, I noticed, the computer's kind of sluggish or whatever. These are great opportunities to take things beyond the transaction and to actually have a conversation with someone and to interact with them. So that's the first scenario. The second one, and this is a very practical thing for those of you that work and maybe work 1 or 2 jobs, maybe it's just taking off an afternoon or giving some time for your family. It's really easy to want to work the 9 to 5 or to work your shift, where the second or third shift or whatever it is. But maybe there's an opportunity where you can get permission from your boss or whatever to just go home early. Maybe it's like 3 o'clock and you're really supposed to work till 5, and if you're thinking about your family and just wanting to be with them, just go ahead and have the conversation. Go home early and go spend some time with them. This is just a real simple way to be relationally generous. It's giving some time in a spontaneous kind of way. The next one, better yet, is like maybe during a lunchtime. So generally, a lot of us have coworkers. This is another opportunity where friendships and relationships develop, and sometimes business and the transactions of the day-to-day bog us down from being able to have conversations. Well, if we're at work and you got a connection or a chemistry with someone that you're working with, and you just want to get to know them better, then maybe hang out with them after work, or maybe take an extended lunch. Maybe you just go early and come back a little bit late. This is something, believe it or not, I've actually done it a couple of times where I've asked the bosses, like, hey, I would like to go just spend just a little bit more time with this person. Do you mind if I just take a 2-hour lunch break? And you might be surprised. Bosses are pretty flexible, generally speaking. And if you don't ask, then they won't ever do it. But that's a great opportunity to just, spend some time and invest and be relationally generous with coworkers. And then the last scenario is what I'm going to call the turn the technology off. This is the do not disturb. And so this is probably the thing that is really starting to bubble, in our society, in our culture today. And noticing this, especially with a toddler, it's like she sees where we're spending our time. And we picked up on that pretty quick, where it's like these touch screens, it doesn't take much for a kid or a little one or a baby to figure out, I just push this and it does this or does that. And what a reminder to us, especially parents, that where are we spending our time? Are we spending it on this device, this thing that really is holding us captive? Or are we spending it with the people that are around us? And so in this last scenario, I just say, turn the technology off. There are settings on your phone where you can do not disturb. I've got one where you just set it at a certain time and the phone doesn't ring, texts don't come through. There are filters out there for your internet where you can shut off your internet at certain times of the day. There's technology out there to help us manage our lives. And it's supposed to be a tool for us and not something that controls us. So that's the last thing I just want to share with you in these different examples, is like, how can you spend some more time? And I'm not talking about the minimum amount of time, but like more than that, above and beyond, something that is generous. Time is a precious commodity, and it's something that is just quickly becoming the most important currency of this world. And today, in the next few moments, as Amanda plays, I would love for you to just think about what are some opportunities that you can invest in people and invest in the relationships in your life. Inside your worship guide is just a slip of paper, and in some cases there's a couple. And we've got pins in the back. The ushers can bring pins. If you need a pin, go ahead and raise your hand. I would love for you to just spend the next few minutes just maybe in just a time of prayer or just listening to God. What is a relationship I need to spend more time in? What's a relationship I need to be more generous with? You know, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a husband or a wife, maybe it's a daughter or son, or maybe it's a coworker. There are many opportunities for us as we just sit back and reflect and think about the different relationships we have. Two sides to this card. All you have to do is just maybe write down a name and maybe just an idea that pops in your head, like, I should take that person to lunch, or I should take them fishing, or whatever it may be, go see a movie. There's all sorts of ways to go spend time with someone. I would just encourage you in the next few minutes to just do that. Jot some names down and think about how you can spend time with